my beautiful lovelies, it's Emmy. Welcome back. Today I'm going to be making pemmican. So if you're not familiar with pemmican, pemmican is a food of many native peoples. It consists of some kind of dried meat, sometimes caribou, moose, beef, deer, that is really, really lean and has been dried. And it also contains some kind of dried fruit, dried blueberries, dried choke cherries, and these are both pulverized into a powder, and then it's binded together with some kind of fat, some kind of rendered tallow or suet. This is all combined together and formed into patties, and this of course lasts for a very long time, anywhere from a few months to even years. So the word pemmican is believed to be taken from the Cree word for rendered fat or tallow. Makes a lot of sense, and ever since I learned about pemmican in school books way back, I wanted to know what it tasted like. So I'm going to be making it today. The inspiration to make this recipe actually came from this summer when we went on a camping trip to New Jersey and we found tons and tons of wild blueberries. So what I did this summer is, after we gathered our blueberries and washed them and picked all the leaves and stuff out of them, I froze them, and then after freezing them for this recipe, I dried them. I placed them in my Ronco food dehydrator, which I've actually used quite a bit. And I lined it with a bit of parchment paper. So I placed them in an even layer, and it took quite a while. It took probably about 12 to 16 hours to get all the moisture out of my berries. So here are what my dried berries look like now. They have shrunk considerably. I would say by a half or a third. So the recipe I'm going to be using today is one that I found on the firstnations.org website, and I will put the link down below. And here is my dried beef, and this was about 1.5 pounds of eye of round beef. I chose that particular cut because it is very, very lean. There's hardly any fat. And all the recipes that I looked at said to make sure you use very lean meat, and I imagine that's to prevent rancidity. What I did was I placed it in the freezer for a little bit to freeze it up a little bit so I could cut it really, really thinly. So I cut into very thin strips, and then I placed it on a rack, and I put it into my oven at 170 to 180 degrees Fahrenheit until it was completely crisp and dry. And that took about 4 hours or so. It may take a little bit less or may take a little bit more depending on the thickness of your meat. You'll know when it's ready when it's just rock hard, solid, and completely dry. Now the reason why I want to do this in my oven rather than doing in my food dehydrator is my oven has a higher temperature. My food dehydrator is probably more around 120 degrees or 110 degrees, which is not hot enough to kill any potential salmonella or cross-contamination. So if you're dealing with meat, you want to do it at a higher temperature in your oven. We're going to grind up our meat and our fruit. So traditionally, the meat would be ground or pounded into a powder using a stone or a rock. Now, as you can imagine, this would be very, very labor intensive. So what I'm going to use, and what I read in the First Nations recipe book, is I'm going to use a food processor. So let me grab that. Okay, food processor. This is about 3 to 4 ounces completely dried. So that's about a cup. Ready? Here we go. Wow, that's loud. Holy cow, it's making my food processor dance off the counter. Okay. So after wrestling with my food processor, I put the dried beef into my blender. I don't think I had quite the volume of meat to blade ratio for it to grind very well, so I put everything into my blender. There's more contact between the dried meat and the blades, and it's doing a much better job. Pretty much have a dry, fluffy powder. So now I'm going to add my half cup of blueberries. In a few recipes that I read, it said you can keep the berries a little bit chunky for a little bit more texture. So now I'm going to empty out my blender. Now I'm going to add some melted lard, about 2 tablespoons. Another teaspoon or so. Lastly, I'm going to add a little bit of sugar, just sugar to taste. My first inclination was actually to add honey because I thought it would be a more natural source of sweetener. But on second thought, I realized that honeybees are not native to North America, so it wouldn't be a natural source of sweetener anyways. They probably traded for sugar, I imagine. So I've learned that water is actually what makes things go bad oftentimes. So desiccants and packets that are included in some of the preserved foods that we have is to remove the water because mold and things grow with water. So in this case, we've removed the water from the meat, we've removed the water from the berries, and we've replaced it with fat, which is hydrophobic, which will repel the water. So a great way to preserve food. Traditionally, I think this would be stored in a leather bag and just eaten from a pouch. For demonstration purposes, I'm going to show you little bite-sized bits. Alrighty, so here's the finished pemmican. Let's give it a taste. All right, here we go. Itadakimasu. It's actually really tasty. It does take some time to work through it because the dried beef is so dry and fibrous, but it actually tastes delicious. You taste the blueberries in there. That little touch of sugar makes the blueberries taste even sweeter. And it just tastes like dried beef, just like a really good beef jerky without all the salt and the preservatives and the nitrates. It's great. So the lard in this recipe serves many purposes. Number one being, it has lots of calories. Number two, it binds everything together. Number three, it acts as a preservative. It repels all of the water, but it doesn't have any flavor. So it doesn't taste like much of anything. It just kind of holds everything together. I was worried that since there's no salt in here that it would taste bland, but it doesn't at all. That little bit of sugar and the blueberries and just the natural flavor of the beef itself, absolutely delicious. Love it. Takes a long time to chew though. So there you have it, homemade pemmican. If you're interested in some other native people's recipes, be sure to check out the fry bread and the ugu duck recipe that I tried previously. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed that one. I hope you guys learned something. Be sure to share this video with your friends. Follow me on social media, like this video, subscribe, and I shall see you in the next one. Toodaloo, take care, bye!